session. So today we are here to raise awareness about the Venglustat trial for type 3 Gaucher disease, which is also called the LEAP-2 mono study, which is a phase 3 study to evaluate the efficacy and safety of Venglustat in adult and pediatric patients with Gaucher disease type 3 who have reached therapeutic goals with ERT. So to tell us more about the study, we have a very distinguished speaker with us today, Dr. Pramod Mistry, who is one of the most prominent experts in the field of Gaucher disease. Dr. Mistry currently is a professor of medicine and pediatrics at the Yale University School of Medicine. He holds an MD and PhD from the University of London and has risen through the ranks in his career to become an honorary consultant and senior lecturer in medicine. Notably, he is also the founding director of the Royal Free Hospital Supra-Regional Center for Gaucher disease. For over 3 decades, Dr. Mistry has been dedicated to advancing the care of Gaucher patients through cutting-edge research. He has played a pivotal role in establishing Gaucher disease centers worldwide and is the chairman of the Project Hope Humanitarian Program for Gaucher disease and the International Gaucher Disease Registry, or ICGG. Furthermore, his research lab has made sustained contributions toward discovering biomarkers, understanding the mechanisms of Gaucher disease, and unraveling the genetic underpinnings of highly variable patterns of type 3 Gaucher disease. He also sees Gaucher disease patients in 3 other locations in New York and Connecticut. So before we begin with Dr. Mistry's presentation, I would like to encourage all attendees to use the Q&A box to submit any questions they may have. And a quick reminder that we cannot address questions containing any sensitive information or any patient-specific details. So with this, let's begin now, and over to you, Dr. Mistry.
Thank you very much, Suyog, for your kind introduction. And I want to thank Tanya, Colin Histed, and Angel for all the work all of you have done behind the scenes together with the interpreters to really have a global perspective for patient advocacy and make them aware about the new developments. So if I can share my screen, I will start to give my presentation. Yeah, okay, all right. So I want to thank our translators for Chinese, Hindi, and Arabic, and I bring my greetings from the United States to all of our Gaucher community outside of Europe and America. This is a very exciting moment in the chapter of Gaucher disease, and I think that we are beginning a new chapter and with LEAP-2 mono study. And I'm going to try and describe the scientific foundations and the phase 2 trials on which this LEAP-2 mono trial is built upon. And I'm going to try and make it as untechnical as possible. But as Suyog mentioned, please post your questions on the messages, and I'd be happy to take them. Okay, so if I can move my slides. These are my conflicts. I'm a professor at Yale School of Medicine. My only conflicts are that I have a research grant from Sanofi, and I'm one of the investigators in the LEAP-2 mono trial. So everybody out there knows what Gaucher disease is. Basically, it is due to a genetic variant that we inherit, one from the mother and one from the father, that leads to low level of this enzyme activity. And that leads to the buildup of a lipid material, fatty substance called glucosylceramide, which is made up of a sugar and a special kind of lipid called ceramide. And so when this lipid builds up in the lysosomes of cells, this is the cell picture with the nucleus, endoplasmic reticulum, mitochondria. And when these lipid builds up in the lysosome, it causes a malfunction of the cells and causes inflammation. And the real type of cell is seen here on a biopsy of a patient with Gaucher disease. And you see this very abnormal cells, and it has got what we call, medical students call, wrinkled tissue paper appearance, okay? So type 1 Gaucher disease is very well recognized by people around the world, and it involves the liver, the spleen, the bone marrow, leading to low blood counts, enlargement of the liver and spleen, and really bad bone disease. And when there is no neurological signs in childhood, then that is type 1 disease. In type 3 disease, there is, in addition, during the childhood period, involvement of the brain, which can be very variable. It can affect cognition, it can affect eye movements, shown here. Normally, we can see right or left easily in a straight line like this. But the saccades are when the eyes are not able to see in a straight line and the eye loops upwards. And sometimes people think that this is like a squint. Okay. And so that is the earliest sign of type 3 Gaucher disease. And then it can progress so much that the eyes cannot move at all. And so the individuals have to move their whole head in order to focus on things. And ultimately, it leads to what we call convergent squints, where the eyes kind of point towards the nose. And the other way that the brain is affected in Gaucher disease is that it can affect the ability to move smoothly and in a well-coordinated manner. And these are some of the technical terms that we describe in the clinic to our students. Ultimately, as the disease progresses, it leads to seizures, and this is a really devastating part of this disease. So this is type 3 disease, and generally in type 3 disease, there is quite severe involvement of the liver, spleen, and bones, but in addition, you get variable involvement of the brain. And this is what we are going to be talking about, type 3 Gaucher disease. Type 2 Gaucher disease is the most devastating form, where the babies become sick in the first months of life. And Tanya was telling me how IGA has been organizing seminars to talk about gene therapy for type 2. And I'm very happy that there are parallel efforts for this devastating form, so that we are not leaving anyone behind. So today we will talk about type 3 Gaucher disease. So when the brain is involved in childhood in Gaucher disease, it can affect individuals in a variety of ways. And this was a study published from the International Gaucher Registry by Dr. Tilki Szymanska from Poland. And basically what it showed is that normally a child with Gaucher disease has a classic symptoms of Gaucher: big liver, big spleen, low blood counts, bone problems. And they are started on enzyme therapy, and the child is restored to health. And around this time, then they have the first signs of neurological involvement. And what I described to you, this inability to move right or left in a coordinated fashion, and we call it saccade. And that around this time also, the child can start to exhibit impaired milestones, and a particularly common manifestation of Gaucher disease are the early signs of autism that they can get as well. And so I have young patients who really have profound autism symptoms, but they are exceedingly high functioning, having IQ of 140 or thereabouts. Then the type 3 Gaucher disease can progress so that there is difficulty in movement because it affects the part of the brain, the cerebellum, that controls fine movement. And so their movements become very incoordinated. So using knife and fork becomes difficult. And they need a lot of help with their daily activities. And ultimately, the saddest part of this is that it can lead to such severe brain damage that there are seizures happening all the time. And so what our goal is, and I think we are really making very good progress, is to stop the disease in its track here so that all our patients with type 3 disease can remain healthy. Now, we've learned some very exciting new knowledge about Gaucher disease. What we have learned is that when the Gaucher lipids that I showed build up in these macrophages, they stimulate the immune system, involving all of the immune cells. So it's almost just like having a COVID type of infection, but it never goes away. People feel that they have inflammation in the body, they lose weight, they feel tired because the body is burning up a lot of energy. But another thing that we've learned in the recent past is when you got this kind of inflammation in the body, because the enzyme, the Gaucher enzyme is low and the lipids are building up, this inflammation then drives more production of the Gaucher lipid. So there is almost a kind of positive feedback loop that puts Gaucher disease as an overdrive, because you have low enzymes, you are building up the lipid, and because of the inflammation, you are making more of the lipid. And so that is done by increasing the inflammation, increasing the level of this enzyme, and the Venglustat is an inhibitor of this enzyme, as is Eliglustat or Sodalga. So a simple way of looking at the Gaucher lipids is that these lipids are important, so we make them, and to keep a balance in the body, it is also turned over and degraded at the same level so that there is a balance inside your body and the cells are healthy. In Gaucher disease, not only is the enzyme low, but the individuals are making more lipid, amplifying this enzyme defect, and so the lipid is building up. When people have enzyme infusions, and it corrects the enzyme deficiency in the liver, spleen, and the bone, but it cannot go to the brain. And when you give substrate reduction therapy, it reduces the rate of production of the lipid to balance the low level of degradation capacity it has. So it has what we call a substrate balance. And so the current treatments, the enzyme and Sodalga or Eliglustat, do not cross the blood-brain barrier. And but there is a new substrate reduction therapy called Venglustat, which actually does cross the blood-brain barrier. And so again, to go over the mechanism of Gaucher disease is that this lipid, it has a glucose, it has a fatty acid, and sphingosine is broken down by the Gaucher enzyme to make glucose and ceramide so that they can be turned over. And when the enzyme is deficient, then all these lipid molecules build up. We call them GL1 or GB1, glucosylceramide, and also this biomarker called lyso-GB1 or lyso-GL1, glucosylsphingosine. And these are bad actors when they build up. So too much of this lipid is very harmful to the body. And so they build up as cells shown here, the Gaucher cells, and that leads to sick child with type 3 and type 1 disease, very big liver in the spleen. And these are classic pictures that we see in type 3 Gaucher disease. Now, this lipid is important, so it is also built up from its building block using this enzyme that we call GL1 synthase. And Gluestat and Venglustat are inhibitors of this enzyme. And so what it does is it reduces the production of glucosylceramide partially, and therefore this treatment reverses Gaucher disease. So this is a very exciting time in the history of Gaucher disease, that now so many patients have transitioned from enzyme to oral medicine. And today we will be talking about an oral pill that does cross to the blood-brain barrier. And so what happened to children with type 3 Gaucher disease is shown here. This is a patient that I saw during one of my visits to Egypt, who was in a life-threatening situation. And through the humanitarian program, this baby started enzyme infusion, and this was at the age of 14 years. Okay, so it has saved this baby's life, but over time, this child is going to develop neurological signs. And what we want to do is to remove that and make it better so that people can remain healthy for all of their life. Okay, so these are the principles of treatment that when the lipid is building up, what we do is give enzymes so that it can break down the lipid, Gaucher lipid, and that is ERT, or enzyme replacement therapy, and then substrate reduction therapy is to give a pill that reduces the activity of the enzyme to reduce the production of the Gaucher lipid. And so what is remarkable about Venglustat is that we have nearly 14 years of experience with Sodelga, which is now approved as a first-line treatment for type 1 Gaucher disease. And the astonishing results of the clinical trials have shown that the improvement of blood counts and reduction of liver and spleen, and these are data long-term going out to 5 years and 9 years, these are very similar to just enzyme replacement therapy. So we've now entered a new era in type 1 Gaucher disease where people are moving from enzyme to just taking a pill every day. Okay, so this is the principle of the substrate reduction therapy on which the Venglustat treatment is built upon. So type 3 Gaucher disease is very important. One of the sad things about medical advances is that most of the focus has been European-centric, that it has been centered on type 1 Gaucher disease due to this mutation that arose in the 10th century in Eastern Europe. But the reality is that there are more patients with type 3 Gaucher disease in the rest of the world, and most commonly, individuals have 2 copies of this mutation that we call L44P. So what this means is that when we think about our global village, represented by the International Gaucher Alliance, only a small part of our community have a good treatment. Vast majority of our community, sadly, are still suffering from the effects of Gaucher disease on the brain. And we really need to do something for them. And I'm very happy and privileged to be able to talk to you about the LEAP trials. Okay. Now, to develop a medicine that is safe and a medicine that we know for sure works, there are 7 long steps. It can take 10 years or even more. So this is not like just doing a study in 5 people and that get approval. The regulatory authorities in Asia, in Europe, at the US FDA are very strict because they don't want medicines that don't work or have a lot of side effects. They have set a standard on ability to show effectiveness of the medicine and also safety that is paramount, okay? So the 7 steps to develop a medicine for type 3 Gaucher disease, and I have ticked first 6, we've already done them, okay? And we are now in the last stretch, which is the LEAP to Monos trial we will talk about. So the first step is to understand the science about how Gaucher lipids affect the brain. And we can do that using mouse models. We need a medicine that gets into the brain. We can show that with Venglustat. We need a medicine that is effective in other types of Gaucher disease, such as enzyme therapy or substrate reduction therapy. We need to understand the effect of medicine in a Gaucher mouse before we test it in people. And we want to be sure that the medicine is safe, not only in healthy people, but if it has been used in other diseases. And then we come to what's called a phase 2 trial, where about a dozen patients are given the medicine. And everybody knows what the medicine is, so it is unblinded. And this study has also been completed, and we call it LEAP. I'm going to describe all of these stages briefly to give an idea of how much progress has been made. And then I will describe the design of the LEAP to Monos study. So the brain, a mouse brain as well as a human brain, is very complicated. It is the most complicated organ in the body. Even in a small mouse, the brain contains 70 million neurons. And there are other cells, supporting cells called microglia and astrocytes and other immune cells that outnumber the neurons 10 to 1. Okay, so now we have all the technology to look at the effects of Gaucher gene by selectively deleting it or rescuing it in different cell types of the brain, because all of the cell types in the brain are affected, not only the neurons. The microglia are involved, which are the immune cells of the brain, and the astrocytes are involved. And we can then apply high technology methods to really understand the mechanism of Gaucher disease. So we've done this, and there was a huge paper that we published last year. And what we learned is that when there is type 3 Gaucher disease, there is a lot of inflammation in the brain, and even the immune cells from the body are entering the brain. And that causes an effect of these homeostatic microglia, which are important to keep the brain cells happy. And they start to malfunction, and it leads to damage of the neurons. And what we also discovered that some new biomarkers that we can measure in blood, which can give us an indication of what is going on in the brain. And we learned that a particular type of cell in the brain called the microglia are very important for brain health. And there is a lot of interest in this cell type, even in fields like microglia. And we've learned that simple things like mindfulness and enrichment activities can lead to your microglia in the brain functioning better. And so holistic care for Gaucher disease is important. But in our mouse, when we gave them Venglustat, it stopped all of these disease mechanisms and restored the mice to health. And so we showed that slowing the production of Gaucher lipids improves brain health. And we discovered a few biomarkers which we think are going to be very helpful for us to take better care of patients in the clinic. So Venglustat is an inhibitor of this enzyme that takes glucose and the lipid ceramide to make glucosylceramide. Okay, and so it slows down the production of this lipid, and it therefore counteracts the effect of Gaucher disease. And so, as everybody knows, Gaucher disease is highly variable. No two patients are alike. Some individuals, as I mentioned, can just have autism. Some people can just have a slight involvement of the eye movement and not able to move their eyes in a smooth fashion. And then some individuals can progress to not able to walk or even have signs of dementia, epilepsy, and it is devastating. So our goal is to stop the disease in its track at the very earliest point. And so I apologize for putting up this technical slide, but what we did was we took the type 3 Gaucher mouse, and you can see that this mouse does not survive for very long, only 20 days or so. And this, when we gave these mice Venglustat, there was really quite dramatic improvement in survival. The mice lived for much longer, up to 90 days here. And what is interesting is that we discovered a new biomarker called neurofilament light, and that is released by damaged brain cells. And you can measure it in blood. And it showed a very nice correlation with severity of neurological involvement. We also found that the Gaucher lipid, lyso-Gb1 or lyso-GL1, glucosylsphingosine, is also reflecting what is going on in the brain. And of course, we found that there is a lot of inflammation in the brain, just as we see in the general body, and that when we give Venglustat, that inflammation goes down beautifully as well. Okay, so this is the scientific foundation on which to build a treatment. So armed with that data, the LEAP trial was conducted in adult patients with type 3 Gaucher disease. This is called phase 2, and it is unblinded. So everybody knows what the medicine is, okay? And so this is the design of that phase 2 trial called the LEAP trial. And what we did was we had 11 individuals, they were all adults, who had known type 3 Gaucher disease, and they had been having enzyme replacement therapy for several years and had achieved very good control of the liver, spleen, and blood counts. And all we did was to add Venglustat, the pill, every day, one pill every day to their medicine. And then, so what we did was measured at the baseline, and then at half a year, 1 year, and all of these patients are continuing to have the treatment long term. And so the goal of this study was first and foremost safety, then look at the biomarkers, and we want to know whether Venglustat actually gets to the brain, okay? Because that is important to show that a medicine does get to the brain and is doing what we expect it to do, okay? And so this is how we checked whether the medicine Venglustat gets into the blood on blood samples, and we found it gets in the blood very nicely. And after a spinal tap, we found that the medicine was also getting into the brain as we would like. So the medicine is getting into the brain, and now we want to know whether it is having an effect to improve Gaucher disease in the brain. And so the biomarkers, we found that after Venglustat, there was a reduction in blood biomarkers, the lysogl1 and lysogl1, okay? But we also found that there was reduction in the same biomarkers in the brain. This is in the spinal fluid that bathes the brain. And in a sample of that fluid, there was a reduction of the Gaucher lipids in the same way that we see in blood. So this is what we call target engagement, and very good evidence that not only is the medicine getting to the brain, but it is starting to do what it is supposed to do. So then we wanted to see how does the medicine help or not help individuals, and this is done by what is called a SARA score, and this is an objective test to measure how good the coordination of people is. And there are a variety of scales that we can look at, so that the higher the score, worse is the coordination in walking, handling hands, dressing oneself, and so on. And you can see that these are the results at 6 months and at 12 months, and most of the patients had an improvement in their coordination. And I'm going to show you the video of 2 patients. This is the first patient before this patient had any medicine, was only having enzyme replacement therapy, and this adult had type 3 Gaucher disease. Okay, and now this is 1 year after taking the medicine. You see, this patient is not needing the support of the wall in order to walk. This is another patient before Venglustat treatment. Okay. And this is after 1 year of treatment. Of course, our goal in the future is that no patient with type 3 Gaucher disease would get to this point. We will prevent this with the earlier initiation of treatment, okay? All right. So then you can also do very simple tests called the trail making test shown here, where you join up alternately numbers and alphabets and time this, okay? So you want to have the lowest level, and you can see at the screening, patients had prolonged time to complete the trail making step. And just like as shown here, there was a dramatic improvement in the trail making test, again showing that the visual spatial coordination was improving. So one very exciting piece of data was also that we did brain MRI, and you can look at the connectivity between the different parts of the brain and neurons. And it showed that there was enhanced connectivity, and this correlated with the reduction of the biomarkers. And this is how we do the functional MRI, and it showed that there was more connectivity happening at weeks 26 and week 52. You see changing from yellow to this, and this is at baseline, changing to 52 weeks, okay. So what we learned is that Venglustat, given in addition to enzyme replacement therapy, was very well tolerated. There were no side effects. There were no deaths or treatment-related severe effects, and all 11 patients have continued in the study. And most adverse events were mild and not related to either treatment. The main thing was some patients developed headache after spinal tap, but that was only temporary, lasting 1 or 2 days. Venglustat has been used in another disease state, and this paper was published. It was a placebo-controlled trial, and you can see that in the placebo pattern, any treatment-related emergent adverse events were the same as we see for Venglustat, and even people taking placebo was very similar to what we see in Venglustat. So we have an unprecedented opportunity that we are building the development of Venglustat on this foundation of very good safety data. What the LEAP trial showed is that patients' liver, spleen, blood counts, everything remained very stable. So there was no change in those parameters. So in conclusion, after 1 year, Venglustat added to ERT showed evidence that Venglustat crosses the blood-brain barrier. There was a robust reduction of the Gaucher lipids in the brain. There was potential to ameliorate neurological effects of type 3 Gaucher disease. There was improvement in functional MRI, and the systemic manifestations were stable, and it was very well tolerated without any major side effects. And this paper was published in Brain just less than a year ago. So now that brings us to the main topic for today, LEAP to Mono study, which is the phase 3 double-blind, double-dummy multinational trial. Okay, so normally, you are in a place where there is no specialist centers that you can go and see all of the doctors you need to see. And you might be having enzyme infusions and you have your one doctor. But we know Gaucher disease affects many different parts of the body, brain, bones, liver, the blood system. And in order to get the best care, you need to see all those specialists. And many patients and families that I talk to around the world tell us how isolated they feel because they just have one doctor who has not seen many other Gaucher patients. So one great advantage of being part of LEAP to Mono study is that you get multidisciplinary evaluation and care. All of your needs are taken care of, and all of your body systems will be examined. So it's like having $1 million workup without costing you anything. And it doesn't cost you to get to the center for the medicine or have the test. It is all covered by the sponsor of the study. And you get access to the medicine earlier before it is approved. It doesn't cost you anything, but it is also a wonderful opportunity to help other type 3 Gaucher disease patients in our collective hope that no patient in the future will suffer like we have done. It is the same as in 1990s when enzyme replacement therapy came around. We wanted no child to have a splenectomy or to need a hip replacement, and that has happened really. So we are on a cusp of a new milestone with this clinical trial. But taking part in the trial is a wonderful way to see multiple doctors and your Gaucher experts regularly to get the best health care that you can imagine. Okay. And so the phase 3 double-blind, double-dummy placebo-controlled trial is depicted here. So I'm very happy to say that we are including children from the age of 12 to 18 years, including adults over the age of 18, and we are going to evaluate to have a total number of patients enrolled to be 40. And so the one arm will be, patients will have a dummy pill of placebo and will continue with Cerezyme. And in the other arm, they will have the real medicine, Venglustat, and they will have a placebo injection that will only contain saline. Nobody knows which part you are in. Your doctor doesn't know it, or even the coordinator does not know it. Okay, so the bags are covered, so nobody can figure out what you are taking. And so this is what is very important in the regulatory authorities want, and everybody will be treated for 1 year, and after 1 year, everything is switched over, and the patient only remains on one medicine, Venglustat, okay? And we are so confident with the phase 2 data and everything else we've learned that we are going to be bold and just switch from the double-blind period to just taking Venglustat. And this is what we call the extended treatment period. Okay, so these are some of the inclusion criteria and exclusion criteria, and that is the purpose of you going for your first visit to the center, because they will look at all of your parameters, but also make sure that you don't have some things that will make you not eligible for the study, such as if there is progressive myoclonic epilepsy, if the liver is severely damaged, we are not enrolling such individuals. But you have to have type 3 Gaucher disease, and I will talk to you in a bit about what is the defining feature of type 3 Gaucher disease. And so patients for the first year will be on the placebo-controlled trial, and then after that, everybody switches to Venglustat, and they will remain under follow-up and receive that free medicine until it is approved in your country. So no one is just going to do the study and then say goodbye and leave. This is a commitment to continue your treatment for as long as it is necessary. Okay. So here are some of the details, and I'm happy. I think Tanya did mention that this will be on YouTube channel, so you can read it. And basically, we want to enroll individuals who've been on enzyme replacement therapy for at least 3 years and have had good control of the liver, spleen, blood counts, and the bone disease. And it is very important that there is a confirmed diagnosis, not only of Gaucher disease, but of Gaucher disease type 3, okay? And so the signature sign of type 3 Gaucher disease is this, which is saccade. Normally, as I mentioned, the eyes can move smoothly in a straight line in one direction, but when there is brain involvement by Gaucher disease, the eyes loop upwards. And so individuals cannot smoothly follow objects, have significant difficulty in reading and processing information. And so after very close discussions with the regulatory authorities, we came to this primary objective endpoints. And so we are now in an era where it is no longer enough to just see that the biomarkers go down. What we want to know, and I'm sure you want to know, how is the medicine going to make my child or me better? Okay. And so these are the two tests we are going to do as a primary endpoint. One is the SARA test, which is a way to objectively capture coordination. Okay. And the other is a very nice and comprehensive neuropsychological battery of tests that checks immediate memory visuospatial construction, language, attention, and delayed memory. So if we were to have a positive result, it will reflect how the patient's daily functioning has improved. Okay, so this is, we are definitely going to look at biomarkers and so on, but we want to see how treatment is improving the lives of the patients. Okay, so these are some of the secondary objectives. We are going to be looking at safety, of course, but also making sure that the liver, spleen volume, blood counts, etc., are kept stable. And we are going to be looking at the biomarkers in spinal fluid, as well as in blood, neurofilament light chain, and so on, shown here, as well as some measurements of bone health. These are some additional exploratory endpoints that we will look at: neurological quality of life, a score for daily activity of living, as well as trail-making test, adaptive behavior scale, and also a regular check of depression using objective tests. So you see, when you look at this list, you're going to have the most extraordinary evaluation of your brain health, as well as of your general health with regard to Gaucher disease. Okay. So one of the additional goals will also be to see, again, confirm, because we showed this in type 2, phase 2 study, that Venglustat is definitely getting into the blood as well as in the brain, and so that we can understand the kinetics of how long that medicine stays in the blood, gives us an idea of whether once daily medicine is going to be enough, which we already think it will be. So this is a different medicine. You don't have to have metabolizer status. It is just one pill a day. So this is an effort of the global Gaucher community represented by the International Gaucher Alliance. Okay, so here are the sites that are shown in Asia Pacific, Europe, North America, and Latin America. And so far, we have very rapidly recruited, we've evaluated many patients, but 16 patients have fulfilled the criteria for enrollment. So as of today, there are 16 patients enrolled, and we are still waiting for 24. And we think that we should reach our target by the end of this year or beginning of in the first quarter of next year. And the individuals that have already started participation in the trial are 7 adults and 9 adolescent children. These are some of the sites in your part of the world, as shown here, in Asia Pacific, in Europe, Latin America, as well as United States and Canada. Okay, so in conclusion, phase 2 brain penetrant GCS inhibitor substrate reduction therapy, Venglustat, have shown a promising response of brain disease in the phase 2 trial. And in the phase 3 trial, double dummy, double-blind, placebo-controlled trial is now in progress as the last step to get approval. And so far, it has ticked off the first 6 steps for the development of a drug. And this is a global effort. And it is in line with the US FDA and the European and Asia Pacific regulatory authorities for approval of medicine, even for rare diseases. And so I am filled with tremendous optimism that I think we might be able to help families and individuals affected with Gaucher disease so that the future generation of patients will no longer suffer from this disabilities related to brain health in type 3. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, and I would be happy to connect you with your local Gaucher expert physician. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Dr. Mistry, for this incredibly informative and enlightening presentation. So your expertise has shed light on the profound light on the ongoing Venglustat trial for Gaucher disease type 3. And we truly appreciate the depth of the knowledge you have shared with us. So now with these valuable insights, we would be excited to open the floor to any questions from the audience. And I can see that we have one question from a participant from China. So they ask that, so they say that I'm a family member of a patient from China and the child is a type 3 patient. So will this drug be available for use in China, and will it be used on children under the age of 12 years of age?
So thank you, Suyog. And I'll start with the last part. It is not available. You cannot be part of the trial under the age of 12. So the minimum requirement is age 12 and to need to have type 3 Gaucher disease diagnosis. And I'm very happy to say that there are 3 sites in China that are recruiting patients, and I'd be happy to provide contact information for them to get in touch with those sites.
All right. Thank you for this information. So since we currently don't have any more questions from the audience, so I actually had a couple of questions. So my first question is, so will the patient be eligible for the study if they have been taking Ambroxol?
That's a good question. We currently, the requirement for entry into the trial is not to have concurrent other experimental treatments, and that will include Ambroxol for a minimum of 6 months. And so if somebody qualifies to take part in the study, but they are receiving Ambroxol, they would have to stop it for 6 months before they can actually enter the trial.
Yeah, and one more question is, so once the study period has ended, so will the patient still be able to take the new medicine, or will they have to go back to just ERT?
Very important question. So this is a long-term commitment. Nobody is going to just walk away from you. People who take part in the study, after 1 year, they will switch to Venglustat, and they will remain on Venglustat until it is approved. And you will continue to have the best of care throughout the period. So there is no question that people who do the study after 1 year, they have to go back to enzyme treatment. And we are not going to give up on our patients. We will look after them for as long as it takes.
Yeah, that's really good to hear. So there is one question in the chat box. So do you have any enrollment center in Pakistan?
Unfortunately, at the moment, we don't have any centers in Pakistan at the moment.
Okay.
But I'm sure, I'm very pleased with the momentum of the enrollment, Suyog, that I think that once we have reached a full target of 40 patients, then additional sites will be opened up for expanded access.
All right. And there is a similar question about the UK, if the trial will be available in the UK.
As far as I know, it is not available in the UK at present. And I think that UK was very high on our on the list of sites to get approved, but the regulatory environment takes longer time in UK. And so by the time the trial started and enrolling and so on, the UK institutional reviews did not come through. But all of the goal here is to try and serve patients throughout the world. We don't want to leave anybody behind, Suyog. And so I think that seeing the momentum in a very short period of time, having recruited so many patients, and we are now on track to completing the recruitment within the next 4 months or so, I think then other sites will also probably open up.
All right. Thank you. And we have one question. So what is the medical reason for not enrolling patients less than 12 years of age?
Well, some of this is technical because under the age of 12 years, to subject a younger child than 10 to the testing, it's too much of a burden. So when Sadelka trials were done, for example, that was all done in adults or people aged 16 years and older. And when it comes to pediatric patients, we want to just focus on older children, adolescent children, so that we can do the proper study to capture all the data.
All right. Okay, so I think so we do not have any other questions at present. So does anyone have any other questions? Then please put them in the Q&A box. Does anyone have any questions from the panelists? Maybe Tanya?
Thanks, Suyog. I do have a question for you, Pram. Just one to end with. So many patients have enzyme replacement therapy at home. So if they are on the clinical trial, because it's a double-blind study, will patients be able to continue to have their enzyme replacement therapy at home?
Yes, a very good question, Tanya. And in fact, we have 2 patients who come from quite far away in the United States, which requires plane trips and so on. And so the sponsor does provide home infusion with green bags so that nobody knows what's in the bag. And so the infusion, whether it is actual Sarezyme or placebo saline, is continued in a home setting. So generally that is available, but if there is a center near easy traveling distance, then there is a preference that the individuals go to the site to have the infusions. The logistics are much, much easier.
Okay. Just a follow-on question from that, Pram. So if the enzyme replacement therapy is delivered, and you say in a green bag, does that mean that patients have to be on Cerezyme, or can they be on other forms of ERT?
So at the moment, this is only for people who, I need to check on that. As far as in the initial iteration, it was only for Cerezyme, but I think the more recent version was that it could be any ERT as long as they have achieved therapeutic goals. But I will confirm that and get back to you.
Thank you very much, Pram.
All right. And Dr. Mistry, we have another question. So will this drug not be used in children under the age of 12 even after it is approved in future?
So generally, Suyog, with drug development, it always starts with the adult population. And so we are very happy, actually, that this clinical trial, the regulatory authorities themselves asked us to include children over the age of 12. And so we will look at all of the data. Safety is always important. And then it will expand as time goes on. I'm quite confident of that. That we definitely don't want. I think the future that I envision, Suyog, is not to have an approved medicine until people get to the age of 12, but these will be these are individuals who are starting to have significant neurological signs at the age of 9. It is not right, I think, to not to offer this kind of treatment. But the first step is to get approval as the US FDA and the regulatory authorities have defined, which is age 12 and onwards. And then I think the further studies could include younger children, but it has to be done in the context of a proper study. But it can't just be, people can't just start writing prescriptions for that. As long as there is proper outcome assessment, including safety, then I can see its use being expanded.
Right. So we don't seem to have any other questions as of now. But in case anybody has any questions, even after the webinar ends, then please feel free to email us the questions and we'll be happy to answer them for you, even after the webinar is over.
All right.
So, yeah. So thank you so much, Dr. Mistry, for this very insightful presentation and for your responses to these questions. So it's really great to learn about this trial, and we are really looking at a breakthrough for, in the treatment of Gaucher type 3 patients. And your expertise has been really valuable in clarifying all these complex matters. So we have reached the end of today's webinar, and I would really like to express our gratitude to Dr. Mistry for sharing his expertise and valuable insights, and to all the participants as well for your participation. So just a reminder that after the event, you will be receiving a short questionnaire via email, and we would greatly appreciate if you could take a few moments to complete it, as your feedback will help us improve our future webinars and initiatives. So with that, we bring this webinar to a close, and thank you once again for your participation and interest. Have a wonderful day ahead. Thank you.
Thank you.